Portals pop up in legends and lore across all cultures. Even in these modern times, people are reporting these portal sightings and even portal interactions. A lot of you have probably heard my story of my Icelandic hudulfolk sighting, and this got me thinking. I wonder if there are any insane portal stories from Iceland. After all, it's been a hotspot for natural activity as far back as recorded history on the place goes. Turns out, there's quite a few wild stories to discuss, and that's precisely what we're going to dive deep into on this episode of the 21 CD podcast. Let's get into it.
Hello citizen. Be advised this content creator is human and is therefore subject to human error. Any information provided by this content creator should be cautiously approached as it may be nothing more than allegation. Remember, trust your government, consume appropriate content, and be cautious of all conspiracy theories as they are the tools of the rebellion.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the 21 CD podcast. As always, I'm your ghost, John. If this is your first time here, welcome. And if anybody wants to support the show, and I certainly hope you do, feel free to Google the 21 CD podcast and give me a follow or a like or a share or pretty much anything you can, anywhere and everywhere you can. Small podcasts like this one, we need all the help we can get from people like you. I can literally only succeed in this space with your help. And let's be honest, nowadays, if you're looking for a specific type of content, you kind of have to do quite a bit of digging to get there. And somewhere in that digging, I think is where people are losing the ability to find me. But with your help, we can dig our way to the top. And I don't want to spend too much time promoting merch, but we do have posters. These things are epic, and you can get it. And other ones. I have multiple different types, and this stuff is good quality. This is like, I don't want to say cardboard, but it feels like it's almost cardboard, okay? And I'm selling them on our brand new website, www.21cdstudios.com. Guys, this episode is going to become the mothership. I'm telling you, when I start talking about the mothership, we're talking about the website, because this is where we are going to be putting all sorts of updates and fun things, and interactions are going to occur here, and we're going to update you on what's to come. You're going to be able to buy merch. You're going to be able to find our episodes. All this kind of stuff is going to be on www.21cdstudios.com. So you might want to bookmark this website or whatever you do. We're even gonna have like the members only stuff up there eventually. It's gonna be legit, okay? It's gonna be awesome. And I finally just pulled the trigger and built a website for us to all sort of stay informed at. So yeah, check it out, whatever. Let's see. And if you guys do want to support the podcast with some coffee money, I do have a Buy Me a Coffee, and you can find that in the link. It's linked in the description of this episode. And to all the people who have supported me financially already, you guys are the OGs. I appreciate that so much. Rock on. You guys keep the party moving. I'll tell you that much. I appreciate it more than you know. So, as you guys might have heard from the introduction, we are going to be returning to a topic that we sort of covered before. Strange sightings in Iceland, right? My OGs will probably recall my elf spotting episode. I believe it's a pretty early one, episode 4 of the 21 CD podcast. And that's the hudulfolk, the hidden folk of Iceland. I believe that I did have a sighting. It was one of the most horrifying sightings that I've had. I've only had a couple sightings in my life. I know I talk about sightings a lot. That's because I have a couple very profound ones, in my opinion, but just profound to me, of course. They're not going to be the same profoundness to somebody else. But this one it scared the crap out of me. So if you guys haven't heard that story, feel free to go back to episode 4 and check it out. It's called Elf Spotting in Iceland. But anyway, it really did get me thinking earlier this week about how spiritual the people of Iceland really are. To be honest, it's kind of unlike anything I've seen anywhere else in the world, and I've been around the block, and they have this respect in Iceland for the land, and it's largely due to the creatures that many of their populations still believe exist. Many people in their communities, in their populations, still believe in these hidden folk, these elves, these trolls, these monsters in the environment that they live in. You know, dragons, ghosts, draugr. They've got the stories are endless. Undoubtedly, though, the most popular stories of Icelandic cryptids revolve around the elves or the hudulfolk. And these beings, even though it sounds like they're just something out of like Lord of the Rings, they've been around much longer than the story of Lord of the Rings has. As a matter of fact, many people actually believe that there's a good chance Tolkien knew things of this mysterious realm, and that Lord of the Rings is actually more true than we might realize. But that's a whole nother conspiracy theory and completely up for debate, just like everything else we cover here. And that's not really our focus today. I have been wanting to cover it, but we'll get to that another time. Long story short, Tolkien kind of seemed to know some things that could prove that this realm may actually exist, this realm of elves and hidden beings. Now, these hidden folk are known to be regular users of portals, and as my OGs know, portals are a pretty big focus on the 21 CD podcast. We do a lot with portals here, and we haven't done much with portals since my return from the abyss. So I thought, you know what? This is a great time to start talking about some portals, and I am incorporating Iceland because I have a very, very exciting announcement to make, and that is that, well, I'm going back to Iceland. It's incredibly exciting for me. I'm gonna go back to Iceland in September, and we're gonna be filming a movie where we are attempting to find these hidden folk, some evidence of these hidden folk. We're going to be going all over Iceland. We're going to be recording all sorts of amazing sites and go the places that these legends are from, and try to find evidence ourselves for what's out there. And I don't know if you guys can tell by the way I'm talking, but I'm just incredibly excited about it. I've been updating gear for the past few weeks now. I have been planning and plotting, and I really can't wait to go there and bring you guys back some incredible, hopefully, evidence of something spiritual in Iceland. So anyway, a lot of you probably don't know at this point. Maybe most of you do. I don't know. But at least some of you know that I'm actually a filmmaker, and 21st Century Dystopian started as that before it morphed into a podcast as well, due to one of my sightings actually occurring while filming one of my movies. So yeah, that's why on this channel we have such a strong YouTube presence. It's because you guys will see movies pop up randomly sometimes on this channel. If it's related to the podcast, you're going to see it. And it's one of the only things that I truly love to do anymore. So, yes, I'm excited to announce I will be returning to Iceland to film a documentary for you guys. And some of the stories that we talk about today are going to be investigated when we go there. So yeah, this sort of episode is to warm you up and get you excited for that journey. We're going to visit some insane stories from Iceland today. And we're going to start with The Tale of the Invisible House. It's a fascinating piece of Icelandic folklore, rich with details and variations. Obviously, these are legends. This is lore. This is stuff that changes over time. But you know, when it comes to oral history, sometimes it is the truth, you know, or rooted in the truth. And in the case of the Invisible House, we have a strange, what seems like a bleed. It's what I would describe as a bleed, which is where two dimensions intersect. But it could also be a craft. The Tale of the Invisible House, it's been passed down through the generations, and story typically takes place in East Iceland. It's a region that's known for its remote and rugged landscapes, which lend themselves to the mysterious and supernatural. And when you see these things for yourself, you will understand why. The exact location that this whole story takes place is kind of lost to time, but it is often described as a secluded area, far from the hustle of villages and towns. And the setting is usually, almost always, in the retelling of the story near a farm or in a field of some sort, where the natural environment is an integral part of daily life, right? Like this is a farm or some place off in the distance, off in the distant land away from towns in Iceland. The central character of this story is usually a farmer. He's a protagonist. He's in Icelandic lore due to the country's agrarian history. So, for those who don't know, the people of Iceland, they had to work very hard to maintain their survival on that island, because it is a volcanic rock that wants to destroy you. So, farmers are regarded as Icelandic farmers are some of the most hardy beings on the planet. And this farmer is no different. He's described as hardworking and observant. He knows the land intimately. And on the day of the encounter, he goes about his usual tasks, tending to his field and his livestock. And he sees something, just barely out of the corner of his eye, and it's something unusual. It's like the faint outline of a structure in the distance. He slowly starts to realize. So this farmer, he approaches the anomaly, and mainly because it's bizarre, it's completely out of place in this landscape that he knows so well, his land, his farm. He's never seen a structure there. So he starts to approach it, and the outline becomes clearer and clearer until he realizes that there's an entire house there, and it's shimmering with some kind of like ethereal glow, okay? And the structure appears almost translucent with sort of an otherworldly beauty, they say, that captures the farmer's curiosity. He's completely smitten by this thing. It pulls him in somehow. And we've heard this about portals before in other stories. So, of course, as any one of us would probably be too, he was overcome with curiosity. And he decided to enter the house. So as he crosses the threshold through the front door, he begins to experience a strange tingling sensation, which sounds a lot like electricity. As he described it, or the way the story is told, is that it felt as if he was entering another realm. And allegedly, that's precisely what happened. The sensation has also been described as thrilling and yet peaceful. The inside of the house, the farmer later said, was just as remarkable as the exterior. The furnishings were very elegant and old-fashioned, with intricate details that suggested a time long past. And the air inside felt different, though, almost enchanted, and there is a sort of pervasive sense of calm about the place. In some versions of the story, the interior is described in great detail, with descriptions of very ornate furniture, beautiful tapestries, and delicate ornaments, and sort of a postmodern sort of vibe. And also in some retellings of this story, the farmer encounters inhabitants in the house. And these beings were described as the hidden people of Iceland, the elves, who look human but possess an otherworldly presence. They are kind and welcoming, and in this story, they treated the farmer with respect and hospitality. The hidden people explain that their world occasionally intersects with the human world, and that's where I get the whole dimensional bleed sort of vibe from this story. And for those who don't know, my theory of the dimensional bleed is based on an experience I had where I think I interacted with a bleed, and it's massive. It's literally where two worlds combine, and there's only a very small window that you can access both simultaneously. And because it's not, time traveling or portal hopping or opening a gateway or anything like that, it's more of a sort of atmospheric event. It's like the whole area, the whole environment. It's an environmental anomaly where the whole area is just sort of rippling, and you can see both sides simultaneously. And that lines up with what the elves allegedly told this farmer. They said that because of this intersection, it allows things like this to happen occasionally. And now, during the time in the house, the farmer engages in conversations with these hidden people, of course, and they share wisdom and knowledge. They revealed secrets about the natural world and hidden realms, and these conversations are always described as being filled with a sense of wonder. The farmer is just absolutely childlike as he listens to these beings, and he leaves with a deeper understanding of the mystical, sort of spiritual forces that are at play in the world, as you would if you encountered such beings. So, to the farmer, it didn't feel like it was much time at all, but eventually he did have to leave the house. He left, and as he steps outside, he turns to look back at the house, and only to find that it's not even there. It's vanished completely without a trace. There's no sight of the building, no evidence that it had ever even been there. And the farmer is just left there, standing in an empty field, and he's bewildered and unsure if what he experienced was real or just a dream. And some people say that there was great passages of time in his human world, whereas there was almost no time passing, it felt like, in this other realm. But regardless, upon returning home, the farmer shared his extraordinary experience with his family and neighbors, and some reactions vary, but a lot of the people actually believed him wholeheartedly. And this is one of the things that makes Iceland very different from other countries, is a lot of them believe that these kinds of beings are actually still out there in their land, roaming the fields and coming out at night. They fully believe in this kind of stuff. And of course, though, I mean, you do have the skeptical ones. Not everybody believes in the elves and the hidden folk, but there is a very strong belief in that stuff there amongst great many people. But anyway, those familiar with Icelandic folklore will recognize this story as kind of a part of, a rich tradition of your typical Icelandic stories. especially relating to hidden people and their magical realms. And so that's kind of the story of this invisible house. And in some versions of the story, there's a few different variations that are very interesting. So like in some versions of the story, the farmer experiences a distortion of time, like we kind of just talked about. And that's where what feels like a few hours in the house turns out to be years in the human world. So upon returning, the farmer finds that his home and the family that he had and everything has changed. And that sort of highlights a lot of what we've heard from other portal interaction stories, where people have been abducted and apparently left this realm, or missing 411 cases where portals are involved. There is a lot of time where people don't seem to be experiencing time in the same way when they're on this other side. When they've gone through the portal and come back, they do recognize a strong difference in time and how it passes. Another variation involves the house appearing only during specific times of the year, such as during the Christmas season or on Midsummer's Eve. These times are believed to be when the boundaries between the human world and the hidden world are thinnest, allowing for such supernatural occurrences. So that's pretty interesting too. But anyway, yeah, so that's the story of the invisible house. And I've got a couple more stories here, but that's one of those things that I'm pretty excited to try to, I don't know, just research a little bit more when I've got boots on the ground in Iceland next month. I think this is going to be a really interesting thing to just sort of imagine as we look out on the Icelandic landscape. Pretty wild stuff. But anyway, let's take it up a notch. Let's get even a little more eerie. This is the story of and I'm probably going to butcher this. I'm just going to call it the Nike. And it's a water horse. Sort of a dragon. It's described as a water horse, but it sounds like a dragon to me. The Nike is a cryptid with a very ominous and malevolent nature. Okay? It's sort of hops from body of water to body of water in Iceland. It seems to need to be fresh water. There does seem to be something about it that prevents it from inhabiting salt water, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm only saying that just because of some of the things I read, the variations of dragons that do pop up in the world. Not all of them can actually be both salt water and fresh water, which is pretty interesting. Gives them a measure of realisticness that I hadn't really thought about before. But the Nike is said to emit sort of a haunting, hypnotic neigh, or like a song that lures unsuspecting victims to the water's edge. And the sound is said to be both beautiful and also deeply unsettling. And it has this thing about it that draws people in, despite sort of an underlying sense of dread. The call is described as absolutely irresistible. It's more of a song, and it's so alluring that those who hear it feel completely compelled to follow it, even if they know that it's probably going to be dangerous. And the closer they get, allegedly, the more they lose their sense of caution and fear. Nike's eyes are described as large, dark, and gleaming with an unnatural light. They sort of emit their own light or reflect light in a bizarre way. And when a person looks into them, they feel as though they are being pulled into a deep, sort of dark quietness. They're captured, they're hypnotized. And despite appearing as sort of a normal horse, Nike's coat is always wet. It's very slick, it's dripping, it's unnaturally wet. And this detail is unsettling to those who get close enough to notice it, and people have said that this just creates a very haunting sort of visual, as you can imagine, this sort of water creature, but it's built like a horse and it's always wet, emitting a strange song. Obviously, this doesn't sound like something you want to meet at night. So This is pretty interesting. So once Nike essentially convinces somebody to mount him, they are instantly trapped. They can't dismount him. Once the victim has settled on Nike, there's no way to remove themselves from him. The horse's skin becomes sticky and it adheres to the rider, which makes it impossible for them to escape. And then Nike is said to suddenly charge toward the water at breakneck speeds, giving the rider no chance to react. And the transition from a calm walk to a frenzied gallop is also reported. It seems like it's, you don't know exactly what's going to happen at first, and then all of a sudden, the worst thing possible is actually happening. Nike basically dives out into the water once it's deep enough, and in the process of doing this, he creates this swirling vortex, and it pulls the rider into the depths with Nike. The water is said to then close over them with an ominous silence, and it leaves absolutely no trace of their entry. The water just closes up around them, and that's that. This water portal is described as unnaturally cold, and it paralyzes the victim. How they know this, I'm not exactly sure, but I do believe it. I couldn't find any stories of victims that escaped from Nike. I'm not sure how this story developed some of the details that it developed, full disclosure. But considering everything else that is happening in Iceland, this thing, I could see something building this legend into what it is now, especially if it's some kind of dragon. But this water portal, it's said that it is so cold in the portal that it drains all of the strength and willpower out of the victim, which essentially renders him absolutely, what's the word I'm looking for? Just weak, incapacitated. There's no power left in you. And those who maintain life, those who can stay alive long enough, will catch a glimpse of Nike's underwater realm, which is described as ghostly, shimmering lights and shadows, and often ghosts of other drowned victims are also seen. These lights are unsettling and disorienting, and obviously add to the nightmarish atmosphere. In some versions of the legend, the underwater realm is actually just filled with spirits of the previous victims, and their faces are usually deformed and twisted, just like it's described you are in hell, should you happen to be tormented there. And these ghosts, these spirits, they will silently watch this newcomer, this new victim, as he takes their place among them. It's said that even if someone manages to escape Nike once, that the creature will then hunt you down more aggressively. It will continue to haunt the waters near the escapee's home, because this thing has the ability to seemingly transport itself from body of water to body of water, and it will just literally wait for another opportunity to drag their victim down. There's a lot of water in Iceland. Nike is described as a vengeful spirit rather than a dragon, punishing those who disturb its waters or fail to respect the natural world. It takes delight in the fear and the suffering of its victims. Sounds like a very vampiric spirit to me, or some kind of dragon. I maintain the dragon idea. I like the dragon idea. There are other dragon stories in Iceland, but we're also seeing some correlations to a vampiric entity as well. Just like we talked about vampires last week and how a lot of cryptids can fit into the true definition of what a vampire or vampiric being is. This Nike sounds like one of those types of beings as well. Many stories emphasize the creature's preference for children, which is also ironic, considering what we just talked about with adrenochrome. These children are more likely to be entranced by the beauty and less able to resist the call of this creature, this seahorse, this water horse. The image of a child being lured and drowned adds a particularly tragic and horrifying element to the legend. Absolutely. Local folklore often includes warnings about specific lakes and rivers where Naikyr is believed to reside. These places are marked by unmarked graves or memorials for those who vanished, adding a chilling reminder of the creature's deadly nature. These are some of the things that I'm hoping that I will be able to find when I'm there. Maybe some of these unmarked graves are still able to be found, because there's so many places in Iceland where it's just, you walk out there and you have no idea what you're going to see next. You don't know if there's going to be a massive cave just in the middle of nowhere, or if there's going to be a gigantic volcano, or if that volcano is going to erupt, or all of a sudden you have, endless black sand beaches or glaciers, or you just never know what you're going to see next. So I'm hoping during the process of trying to find Naikyr, we can find some of these unmarked graves. That would be insane. The legend of Naikyr, the water horse, is obviously horrifying and has maintained its position in Icelandic folklore. And in my opinion, it is definitely one of the creepiest stories from Iceland. I think that being is probably one of the most menacing creatures that I researched for this episode, and honestly, one of the most menacing creatures I was able to find coming from Iceland. Now, this is a topic that I have talked about before on episode 4, the Elf Towers, or the Elf Hills. These are like little structures that are all over the landscape in Iceland. They sort of speak to this deep-seated belief in elves and hidden people. So we're going to go over these things in more depth. I didn't really cover them in as much depth as I feel like they deserve. So I did a ton of research, and for anybody who's wondering, I'm trying to keep track of all these crazy legends and details and of such and everything. So if I'm stuttering a little bit, it's because I'm trying to read along with what I wrote earlier. But these elf holes, which are translated as elf hills or elf mounds, are natural features such as hills, mounds, or large rocks believed to be inhabited by elves or hidden folk. And these places are considered sacred in Iceland and are treated with great respect. They'll not even build around them, or if the road needs to be moved, the road will be moved so that it doesn't violate these elf hills and these elf churches. These elf hills are often marked by their unusual beauty, distinctive shapes, and mystical atmosphere. They glow faintly, it seems at times, especially during certain times of the year, and often have an otherworldly presence that seems to sort of set them apart from their surroundings. They're very ominous. They're very easy to spot. You know when you're looking at one, and I can attest to this. This stuff is crazy, man. Like, when I tell you that Iceland changed my life when I went, I am not exaggerating. I do not see this planet or this reality the same way as I did before I went there. There's just something about that place. So if you're ever like on the fence, just go and experience this for yourself. It's insane. I would say that Iceland is one of the main reasons that I believe in spiritual things as strongly as I do. Now, in Icelandic folklore, elves, kind of like we already said, are sort of depicted as human-like, but they possess more beauty and more grace than humans. They're human-like, but they're not human. And they live in these hidden realms that exist parallel to the human world. And similar to elves, these hidden people, which are actually different, the hidden people and the elves are often two different entities. The hidden people are also human-like, and they live in a secret world as well. They have supernatural powers and are very harmonic with nature and are often indistinguishable from humans. So that's a pretty interesting difference from elves. Like, you can kind of tell when you're looking at an elf. You can't always tell when you're looking at a hidden folk, which is very interesting. Elves and hidden people are generally considered benevolent, but can be extremely protective and territorial of their homes and their homeland. They reward respect and kindness, but can also cause misfortune to those who disturb their dwellings. And there is a great effort to not disturb their dwellings in Iceland. Like, you've got to question that, right? Like, you've got to take that into consideration when so many of the real, regular people believe in this kind of stuff in an area. You've got to ask yourself why. Like, what makes that place different from the places where people don't believe as strongly, you know? Legends often describe elves inviting humans into their realms, offering hospitality, and sometimes even bestowing gifts. These interactions typically occur during very specific times when the boundaries between the worlds are thin. So here you go again. Like, you've got these boundaries between the worlds, this dimensional bleed. I mean, is it possible that Iceland is just on a rift of some sort? Like the whole island? Is the whole island a portal? I mean, maybe. It's insane out there. Portals to the elf world are believed to open during special occasions such as Christmas Eve, Midsummer's Eve, and New Year's Eve. During these times, the hidden doors of Elf Hills become visible, allowing access to the other realm. It's pretty insane. Natural indicators of these elf hills are unusual lights, sounds, or a sense of enchantment, often accompanying the opening of portals during these times. And apparently you can journey to this elf world at these times as well. Curious or invited individuals who enter these portals find themselves in a stunningly beautiful and serene world, according to this legend. And this hidden realm is a reflection of the natural world, but is different. It's enhanced. And the spiritual qualities are much stronger. That's exactly how I envision heaven. Like, man, I didn't mean to talk about heaven on this episode. That's a topic that I rarely ever talk about. But like an adjacent world parallel to this one where everything is just perfect. It's just right. You know, there's tons of spiritual beings out there besides just, you know, angels and demons. There's a whole host of spiritual creatures of all types. And they can be messing with us too. It doesn't always have to be some massively divine, you know, archangel or some super demon like, I don't know, the devil himself or you know, Gog or like whatever, like whoever, like Zeus, you know, like it doesn't have to be that kind of thing. There can just be the little spirit creatures that are sort of like not really part of any great war between good and evil. They just are. They just exist, just like the animals of this planet exist. And they can also interact with us. Like, that's such a crazy thing to consider. You know, I was talking about goblins the other day, and it's interesting how goblins are kind of like sort of, it seems like they're almost like the rats of the spirit world, you know? My wife has a very like deep sort of relationship, I guess you could call it, with the goblins, because she's from Ecuador, where stories of goblins are just, they run rampant everywhere down there. And I can attest there is some crazy stuff that happens down there, and I've heard some bizarre stories relating to goblins. And it's just, we just kind of reached the point where we were like, it's almost like goblins are just the rodents of the spirit world, you know. And it's interesting to think about how we are probably interacting with those types of things too, not just these mega beings. But I digress. I'm sorry. So inside this elf world, you know, it's enhanced with all these super spiritual qualities, and everything is right and perfect and beautiful. And inside there's a sense of timeless celebration, just happiness always, constantly, music, dancing, feasting. The very environment exudes joy and just wonder and awe and beauty. It sounds exactly like, you know, how I would describe heaven. And there's a couple different tales that go into these, you know, that mention these elf hills in great detail and revolve around these elf hills. There's one where a traveler discovers an elf hill, and it seems so out of the ordinary he can't resist it. He goes closer to it. And it was allegedly some sort of special night. And they find that there's a hidden door in this elf hill. And I'll try to describe these elf hills as best as I can, because you're probably literally thinking like a hill, but it's not really a hill all the time. Sometimes it's literally just black volcanic rock in mounds or towers, like pillars almost, that look like they've collapsed. So seeing one of these things on a special night, shimmering and with the door appearing in sort of the base of it, this traveler sort of enters. And they're greeted by elves who invite them to join in this celebration, in this world of wonder. And the traveler is treated with great kindness and experiences a sense of wonder and awe and joy. And when he decides to leave, he finds that much more time has passed in the human world than he even realized. And this, you know, once again, we're talking about this time distortion. This is a portal. The time distortion adds a layer that we see in many different portal stories. Even today, some Icelanders report seeing these mysterious lights or experiencing strange phenomena near reputed elf hills. They know where they are. They respect them. They are a deep part of their culture. And these modern accounts keep the legends alive, of course, and contribute to the ongoing belief in these hidden people and these elves, you know. And many Icelanders, especially in rural areas, maintain very cautious respect and care of elf hills. There's a seer out there that's pretty popular, and she actually runs a elf museum of sorts, but she tells this story of how the elves come to her and tell her to defend their land and their elf hills. You know, construction projects are often altered or even halted altogether to avoid disturbing these sites. It just sort of adds to how culturally important these things are to the Icelanders. It's something that, like, that's another thing you don't really see a lot of other places in the world. These stories of elves and hidden people, they have a tangible impact on modern Icelandic society. When you reroute roads or you put buildings somewhere else to avoid disturbing these elf habitats, again, like that's something that is just so different than anywhere else that I can think of off the top of my head. But maybe you guys have seen a place that takes the supernatural and the spiritual as serious as Iceland. If so, tell me about it in the comments. I'd love to do some research on it. There's a couple noted accounts that are very popular of construction projects being changed due to the presence of elf habitats. One was the Alftanes Road project in 2013, which was when a road construction project near Reykjavik, which is the capital of Iceland, was delayed because of concerns about the elf habitat. The project only proceeded after consulting with elf communicators, which ended with them essentially being ambassadors to the elf world, where they communicated that the elves would allow the road to be built, but a specific rock had to be moved. And that rock is now known as Reykjavik's Elf Church. It's a large rock known as the Elf Church. It's in Reykjavik, and it was preserved and integrated into the city's landscape and planning so that it will never be disturbed again. And elves are still believed to use it as a portal and to reside there. That's real. Like, that's a real story. That's crazy. These stories are just endless in Iceland. You know, the belief in these hidden people, these elves, it's often woven into Icelandic holiday traditions where stories of elves and portals are shared regularly during Christmas and midsummer celebrations. It's just a very different celebration than I think we are used to, because it's so rooted in the belief that this stuff is real. Feels like when we celebrate stuff, we kind of either don't care if it's real or not in the Western world, or we just kind of like don't believe in anything a lot of the time. We lose the spirit of what we celebrate. But not in Iceland. These stories are passed down through generations and maintains a connection to the country's mythological past. It keeps them connected to the stories that made them who they are. It's pretty awesome. See what else I've got for us. I know I've got some more stuff here. I'm looking through my notes and reading some people's input. I sometimes get some help when I mention these things, and allow people to read my stuff so that they can provide me with notes. And I'm seeing one person here saying the Scottish Kelpie is a lot like the Nycure. The Scottish Kelpie is a water spirit that lures people into the water in Scotland. And both legends highlight the dangers of supernatural beings that inhabit natural features. It's very interesting. There's also the Irish, I'm going to mispronounce this, but the Sidhe, which is said to be very similar to Icelandic elves. And they live in mounds and hills as well and have interactions with humans, often inviting them into their realms. You know, obviously, Iceland is a Nordic country, so many of its tales originate thanks to the Norse mythology. But regardless, like we said, it's all of this is deeply ingrained in Icelandic folklore, and they respect it deeply, whether we believe in it or not. There's another interesting one that I want to talk about today. It's the hidden door of, Djupavik. Another story coming out of Iceland involving a small, isolated village. There's many stories like that. And this particular village is in the West Fjords of Iceland. And the village is known, this village, Djupavik, is known for its rugged beauty, its remote location, and the presence of an abandoned herring factory. That's like herring, like the fish. The factory was built in the 1930s and was once a bustling center of activity, but fell into disuse in the 1950s. The factory now stands as a haunting relic of the past, with its crumbling structures and ghostly atmosphere. It's a perfect setting for legends and folklore. I'm going to try to find that. I got to see that factory. But according to the legend, a local fisherman exploring the ruins of this herring factory stumbles upon a door. He finds this door in the basement, and he says the door wasn't really like any other door. It was made of ancient weathered wood and covered with runes, like Norse runes, like Elder Futhark, Younger Futhark runes. And he says there was a slight glow to them, it felt like. It seemed like this door had an energy to it. and that energy drew the fisherman in. And according to the story, the fisherman, much like with the experiences with Nike, was very afraid, but kind of couldn't resist. The guy went in the door, he went through the door, and experienced again this deep passage of time. But while he was inside, he also felt this sort of joy, this awe, this joy. And residents of Djupavik report strange occurrences around the factory too, by the way. It's not just this one story, particularly at night. And they often include eerie whispers, music, very faintly playing in the background, lights that are flickering near the building, like not like electricity, like powered lights, but like orbs almost. And these things are often attributed to the supernatural presence that's associated with this door that allegedly exists. And the door is believed to only appear and open on certain nights of the year, such as the summer solstice, the winter equinox, or during specific lunar phases. This is a thing that we're seeing regularly in these Icelandic legends, these portals that are only opening during parts of the year. And these times, again, are when this veil, if you want to call it that, but this barrier between the human world and the spirit world is thinner or just broken altogether, and you can actually just pass through at will. On one of these nights, our fisherman that we were discussing before happened to go and investigate and find the door. What I could kind of piece together was that at first, when he opened the door, there was a blinding light. And then he steps through and he essentially found himself in a world that was both familiar, like he recognized it, but it was also completely alien. It wasn't the same world. Just like these other experiences that people have had by going in the elf doors. And he said that, according to the legend, that the world was filled with vibrant colors and sort of an otherworldly atmosphere. He described the elven realm inside, because it was apparent to him that this was elvish, or elven, however you want to describe it. It was stunningly beautiful. It was a perfect blend of nature's splendor and the supernatural, spiritual influence. Plants were glowing, he said, and the water shimmered with sort of an iridescent light. And then, of course, he encountered the elves, and he described them as ethereal beings with striking beauty and an aura of serenity. They welcome him, and he joins in their celebrations and cue the same ending as a lot of these other stories where people are invited into, the elven world. And you can ask yourself too, like, are these doors popping up as an invitation? Like that is the invitation itself to anybody who may want to take it? Maybe it's not all accident. Maybe it is for specific people. And again, he recounts how the elf realm is filled with music, dance, and feasting. They share ancient stories and secrets of their world. They revealed a deep connection to nature and supernaturalism, and the fisherman feels a profound sense of joy and wonder. Pretty crazy. But that's not all. Right before the fisherman leaves, it seems like the elves gave him a small stone of some sort, and this stone had some kind of magical or spiritual properties that granted him wisdom and insight. And they then warned him, keep this location, keep this door a secret. We want to protect not only our world, but also yours. Pretty interesting. So there again, we're finding these details where, when the fisherman left through the door, he discovers that several days had passed instead of several hours, which is what it felt like to him. His absence had caused some of the villagers to send out a search party, allegedly, because he was missing, and it was such a small village that it was pretty much known if anybody was out of place or missing. He described it as just that. He got lost. He didn't tell anybody where the door was, and that's that. He actually became a pretty respected figure in Djupavik. He's known for his insight and understanding of the natural and supernatural worlds. It says he went on to become sort of a man of renown for a while. And like we said, according to the story I found, true to his promise, the fisherman never reveals the exact location of the door. But of course he tells people, especially his close friends and family, through time, the story of what he encountered. And his descendants to this day allegedly continue to honor the secret, keeping the mystery of the hidden door alive. And nowadays, villagers are actually occasionally reporting hearing sounds like strange noises or seeing lights near the factory still. And that also just keeps this legend alive. It keeps the story being told. Some people even attempt to find the door, but nobody's found it yet. I don't know if I'm going to go looking for the door, but I might try to see if I can find that herring factory. That would be pretty interesting to try to locate. But again, we just see how much these tales of portals and elves are ingrained in Icelandic nature. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening. Remember, if you want to support the show, just Google the 21CD podcast and follow and share us everywhere. If you want to support me financially so I can make the most incredible film out in Iceland that I possibly can, or so that I can, continue my addiction to coffee, I do have a Buy Me a Coffee link. It's linked in the description. Please go to www.21cdstudios.com and buy some posters. They're super cool. My propaganda leaflets are effective and they're awesome, and they're designed by yours truly. So anyway, thanks guys. I had a lot of fun talking to you guys tonight. These are some of my favorite topics to talk about. I'm a little bit wired tonight. I'm feeling pretty good. My schedule has changed up since we are now doing Wednesdays. I can take all of Tuesday and give you my best effort instead of what I was doing, which is basically coming home after a 12-hour workday and trying to do it at like 3 in the morning. So I'm pretty stoked that the 21CD podcast is moving the way it is and is only getting better and better and easier to manage. And a lot of that is thanks to you guys constantly pushing me. So thank you guys. I will talk to you later, and remember, don't drink the water and question everything. See ya.